All right, everybody, come on in. Come on in. Come on into the room. It is Holistic Women Wednesday. Tag people in the comments. Let them know that we are live. Let them know that the live is beginning. Hopefully, everybody is having a wonderful Wednesday. I know here in the Carolinas it is rainy and gloomy, but look, get up just for about 20 minutes so that we can have this conversation. This is going to be a midday motivation, but at another level. We have been talking about conquering our health, and we're not just talking about like our physical and our spiritual health, but we also want to make sure that we are conquering our mental health, because let me tell you, it is so important for us to not just to be spiritually and physically fit, or physically and mentally spiritually, strengthened. We want our minds to be strengthened as well, because how we see it, how we think about a thing is how we see it, and how we live out the rest of our lives in comparison to how we feel and how we think. So we want to make sure our minds are strong, our minds are strengthened. And I'm just grateful because not only do we have, just spiritual insight, but we also have people who are called medically and mentally and as like social workers that can speak to some of the things that we as women are navigating through in our minds. So I am so excited because I have a friend of mine who's not just a holistic woman, but a wife, a mom, and she is a licensed and clinical social worker. And she is going to help us take this conversation full circle today. So we are going to be talking about conquering our mind. It is Mental Health Awareness Month. Y'all know how we do on Wednesdays. This is our midday motivation. So hopefully something that we say and something that we do today will motivate you to start to think about things differently. Okay. So I'm going to bring my good sis Unique on. Let me get her in the room. Get her in the room. Y'all show some love in the comments for Unique.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Thank you for joining us
Of
today.
course. Thank you for having excuse me. Thank you for having me. Got my water here.
Absolutely. So we have got some questions, some topics that a lot of the women were like, you know what? As mental health awareness, I need these
Right.
answered. So
Okay.
I'm gonna read some of the answers. If y'all are watching and y'all have questions, or you like, listen, let's touch on this topic, put it in the comments. Like we'll talk about it, we'll deal with it. Y'all know we don't hold long, so make sure y'all get them comments in early. Share this. Amanda, I see you on here. Sharonda, I see you on here. Y'all, I see you with D. Vinica, y'all on here. If y'all got questions, comments, or want to add anything, make sure y'all get in the chat. So, okay, again, so for those who are just joining, we are recapping, not recapping, I'm sorry, but we are furthering the conversation on what it means to conquer our mental health. And we received some questions on a post. Some people sent me direct and private messages, and then just some of the things that I've been talking through with some of the ladies in the community. And one of the main themes were some women were just struggling with, what is the cause of my mental illness, or what causes mental illness? Could you speak a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And I'll of course give you the space to comment on it spiritually, but as a
Yeah.
Christian therapist, I would be remiss not to mention this.
Mm.
Pretty much the cause of all illness is because we live in a fallen world and because of sin, right? Not necessarily our sin, like, okay, I have
True.
mental illness because I sin, but the sin of the world, right?
Yes.
God's original design was not that we be sick, but we all know what happened, and here we are today dealing with the ramifications of sin. So
Yes.
that's kind of the base of it. But as far as individually, sometimes it's usually the cause of mental illness is some type of trauma, right? Whether it
Hmm.
be trauma in your childhood, this could be physical, this could be unfortunately sexual, this could be neglect, this could be just all not having the things that you need growing up without food, water, our basic necessities. These things
Yeah.
can lead to mental illness. And then of course you have just like the physiological component of medically. There's genetic, just like people have medical issues that so my grandmother had this, my mom had this passed down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes just the chemistry, the physical chemistry of our brains, genetically or otherwise, can lead to mental illness. And then you have physical injuries. Like some people are perfectly fine and then they have an accident, they have a fall, and now they have a traumatic brain injury that leads to, you know, what we classify as mental illness. So there's lots of causes. Obviously, it will vary from person to person what the root cause is, but generally, I lead with the fact that we just live in a fallen world, and we are
Yeah.
victims to the ramifications of sin in the world, and it
Okay.
manifests differently in each person's life, of course.
Right. So it's not necessarily, so I'm understanding correctly. So
Mhm.
the mental illness or the mental health disparity that I may be dealing with is not necessarily that it was hereditary, meaning I just because my mom had it, I had it. It
Mhm.
could be a thing of a trauma, a learned behavior, something
Yeah,
like that. Okay.
it can be trauma, it can be genetic, but even with genetics, we can have a gene for something, but typically it's our environment that causes that thing to manifest, right?
Mm.
So one of the things, and I always try to correlate it to a medical condition that most people understand, diabetes. If you don't have it, you know somebody who has it, and we kind
Yeah.
of get it, right? So most of the people in my family have diabetes, right? But
Right.
I but they have the gene for it, and their lifestyle and their
Yeah.
choices activates it. I don't
Oh,
want diabetes, and I'm not
that's
going
so
to have diabetes.
good.
So I do what I can to create an environment. So my physical lifestyle and my
Yes.
eating. So I may have the gene, but I won't see the manifestation of that gene in this life, right? In my life, because I'm aware, okay, that gene is there. Let me take care of my body, right? Because I don't
Mm.
want that. And
That's
of course,
good.
things happen and out of our control, but because I'm aware of the gene, I'm gonna do what I can and leave it up to God. Do what I can to take care of my body, and
Yeah.
in hopes that that doesn't manifest in my life.
That is awesome. I love what you just said because of just because I have the gene or I have the makeup to kind of follow in this path, it's because of my choices and my lifestyle that
Right,
I have not been affected in that way by it.
right, right,
Oh, that's so
right.
good because even mentally, like you can see what mental, issues look like in your like say if you grew up with a parent that suffered with depression, you
Hmm.
see the signs of that. You may even have, just because it has been doctrine in you as a child growing up, you don't have to succumb to that mental illness because you have a choice to make. Like, okay, I won't, I've seen this happen, but I can think about and
Hmm.
I can walk this thing out differently. So when issues or I'm dealing with hurt or I'm dealing with like a trauma or a breakup, whatever I may be dealing with, I can choose to do something different so that I don't go down that path.
Yes. Oh, you can
Does that
choose to
make
get help.
sense?
Yeah, right. Or you can choose to, if
Yeah.
you notice it happening to you, even with your best efforts to try to avoid it, then you can say, okay,
Yes.
this is happening. Let me choose to get help early so that it doesn't, I don't find myself in a place that is difficult to get out of.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, I just
Yeah.
want to make sure I don't miss. Sometimes these comments don't be coming through, so y'all, I'm sorry if I missed something, but leave your comments here. I'm gonna try to go back to them. All right, so the next thing was how are intrusive thoughts? So I hear a lot of people say I'm not acting on my intrusive thoughts, and it's kind of
Yeah.
become like a little fad now, like a little TikTok
Yeah.
thing or whatever.
Yeah.
But how are intrusive thoughts related to your mental health?
So in answering that question, the first thing I want to do is define mental health, right? Because I hear it
Yes.
used in a way, mental health, just like physical health, is just what it is. It's just health,
Hmm.
right? So you
Hmm.
wouldn't say this man has health, right? You would say he has poor health or he has bad health, right? So our mental health is just what it is. It's just the makeup of our mental, emotional kind of being. And so you can have, and that's the
Mm.
spectrum. So you can have poor mental health, you could be okay, you can have really
Yeah.
great mental health. So it's just it is. 'Cause I hear people say, "Oh, she got mental health." I'm like, everybody has
Has mental
mental
health.
health, right?
Right, right,
Whether or not
right.
it's good or bad is a different question. So,
Okay.
so we have mental health. So intrusive thoughts, yes, you're right. It is a fad. Like most mental health terms are becoming fads. So intrusive thoughts are defined by unwelcome or unwanted thoughts, right? Similar to if you had an
Mm.
intruder in your home, somebody you don't want there, you didn't invite them, right? So we have thousands of thoughts a day, each human being does. Intrusive thoughts, the way if you clinically they're defined as something that you don't want there, is disturbing, and you kind of
Mhm.
know that that thought is not coming from you, right? So it's different if I say, you know what, I want to think about this, and I start thinking about that thing. An intrusive thought is you going about your day and suddenly you have a disturbing thought about something that
Yeah, yeah.
you know that you typically wouldn't be choosing to think about.
Right.
So um obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, is one of the mental health disorders that is kind of one of the symptoms are intrusive thoughts. I know a
Mm.
lot of people think OCD is just cleaning obsessively.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not what it's about. It's about
Making things
obsessive.
organized.
Right. Or I'm OCD. Like, please don't. I tell people, please
Yeah,
don't speak that over yourself, because
right.
obsessive means you have obsessive thoughts and then you have compulsive behaviors. That's what that illness
Mm,
is about. So people who are really OCD, they're cleaning because they think if I don't clean, I'm going to die. If I don't clean, something
mm,
bad's going to happen to me. Those are the obsessives. I have to flick the light on and off 30 times or I'm going to die. Like, that is what obsessive compulsive disease really is. So I tell people, please,
yeah.
if you're a clean person, do not speak OCD over yourself. That's not what that
Okay.
is at all.
Mm,
But so how it affects your mental health, the thoughts are distressing. So if you're constantly having distressing thoughts, you're gonna die, something bad's gonna happen to you, or things like that, it's gonna distress you. And naturally, if we have distressing thoughts constantly and we dwell on them, they're gonna affect our daily life. So to answer
yeah.
the question in sum, if you're constantly thinking or having these thoughts intruding your mind that are concerning, that are depressive, then naturally that's going to lead to you having some difficulties managing a mental, whether it be anxiety about the thoughts or some type of
Yeah.
depressive
So
behavior.
what are some I would say, like, so intrusive thoughts, okay, I know they're unwanted,
Hmm.
um, and you said they're unwelcome and unwanted thoughts that we
Hmm.
have like throughout the day.
Right.
Say if I'm someone who's dealing with like things like that I feel like are speaking to me, telling me
Hmm.
to do things, how would you say practically, because I'm gonna speak to that spiritually right next, but like
Right.
how would you say practically, is that considered intrusive? Is that a form of psychosis? Like what is that?
Right. So yes, there's a huge distinction. If you are hearing audibly something
Yes.
that is not the voice of God, then clinically that's classified as some type of psychosis, or what we call, I mean, there's 7 forms of schizophrenia, but one of the um how we distinguish between the forms, when people, what they call, to have auditory hallucinations, right? So
Okay.
if you're hearing something that is saying do this, hurt this person, hurt yourself, then that will be considered, if you went to a medical doctor, they're going to diagnose you with some type of psychotic episode, and they're going to diagnose you with some form of schizophrenia, and probably give you
Mhm.
medication to address that. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, so that's the medical side. But of course, we know that there's a spiritual component to
Yes.
things,
Yes.
seeing things, feeling things that are not there. But in a medical world, they don't operate. A
Yeah.
doctor's not going to tell you, "Oh, you need deliverance." They're going to say, "Here, you
Take this
know,"
medicine. So
because that's what they're trained to do. So no shade to doctors. I
yeah, yeah,
completely
yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
so that's what that is. So if you are having those types of things, my first my I would recommend obviously getting surrounded with community, Christian community, a pastor, a minister, but I also would not, for your safety, right, would not tell you not. I don't want to negate the medical part, right? To get, because there are people who I
Absolutely.
know who hear voices and they take medicine and it calms it down. So I
Okay.
definitely would advise people to seek both of those avenues and trying to get some healing and deliverance from that.
Absolutely. And then one of the things, like, I was studying Mark 5, and that is the story about the man who was tormented with the legions. And
Mm-hmm.
so I have like a spiritual, practical kind of like study guide that
Mm-hmm.
kind of pulls things from the Bible for us to deal with it practically. But it was talking about the man, he was tormented and he would be in the cave, like hurting himself, cutting himself with like
Yeah.
rocks and stuff. So
Yeah.
that is a practical form of psychosis, but
Yeah.
is a spiritual form of dealing with demons and legions that are living within you from not having the presence of God like
Mm-hmm.
immediately next to you. So one of the ways that in scripture, in the story of Mark 5, when we are dealing with things that we feel like are speaking contrary to
Mm-hmm.
what God is saying in our lives and in our minds, the first thing that I got from that was when Jesus was present, he
Mm-hmm.
addressed the thing that was controlling the
Yeah.
mind and not the person. So I would say to a person who feels like, the fact that you were even able to formulate this question lets me know that you're in your right mind, but you're just dealing with something that's trying to take control over your mind. So I
Mhm.
would say get as close to God as you can. And when I mean it, I mean like get in your word, What does the Bible say? How do you have a sound mind? Search the scriptures and get, like you said, get around Christian community, get around like a pastor or mentor, as well as, the therapist or the psychiatrist. But you want to make sure that you are feeding your spirit, because at the end of the day, like you said, mental illness is a form of illness, and illness is in this world because of sin.
Right.
So we want to make sure that we are inviting Jesus, inviting God into those spaces so that he can deal with the enemy or the torment that's happening on the inside of us spiritually.
Yes. I also think of 2 Corinthians 12 when Paul talks about a thorn in his flesh. So people usually
Yeah.
stop there. He says, a thorn in my flesh, a messenger from Satan to torment me. And so he
Mhm.
doesn't go into detail. So no people kind of guess what is he talking about. But he says, when I hear a messenger, I wonder, like, was Paul experiencing was he hearing something? Was he having intrusive thoughts?
Yeah.
Because what does he
Yeah.
mean by a messenger from Satan to torment me? He was very specific when he said that. And of course, we don't know what theologians argue about what he's talking about.
Yeah.
But I often wonder, what messenger was he talking about? Because lots of people deal with these, the hearing of the voices and intrusive thoughts and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And also, one of the most prominent, I think, figures, or not just figures, because it's not like a story. This is like real. This is real life. As a Christian, we believe that the Bible is the adulterated word of God. So, but David, he dealt with so much like despair
Mm-hmm.
and depression,
Yeah.
that even if we pay attention to Psalms, the
Yeah.
way he was able to overcome his depression and his despair was, the art. So he wrote songs, but a
Mhm.
lot of that, if you read and really study his life work and then read some of his songs, you will understand like the deep anguish that he felt, even by being a man that was after God's own heart. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So you can be high spiritually, but mentally you could be like depleted.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things, like with Holistic Woman, I'm like, I feel like God has given us an avenue where he's like, listen, I don't just want you spiritually whole or spiritually healthy. The goal is to be mentally and physically. I
Right.
wanted to read something. I'm gonna try to find it about David that I really thought was like really good, because um yeah, they said that David, he suffered with like guilt and remorse, suffered with fear and paranoia. He
Mhm.
also suffered with depression and despair. And I'm like, that's some of the things that a lot of us here have either experienced or are currently suffering through.
Right.
And then one of the things is, it said that he was the steps that he took to get his healing. It talks about how God played a significant role in David's journey toward healing from his mental health struggles. So they said David will often seek God in prayer. He would ask for forgiveness and guidance, and he would ask for strength. And through his faith and reliance on God, David found solace and hope. So one
Mhm.
of the ways that we can find, like we can begin to walk out this healing, is to really call on the name of Christ. And I
Right.
don't want to make it too deep, but that's who we are. That's the foundation of this
Yeah.
community, is our faith. But he turned to God in prayer. He asked for forgiveness. He also asked for guidance and strength, knowing that we can't do this in our own ability.
Right. You
So, like
can't.
you said, we need the clinical and we also need the spiritual. This is like a three-stranded cord right here.
Yeah.
It can't just be me. It got to be God, and it got to be like the people that He put in place to speak to this thing clinically.
Right.
So I think
Absolutely.
that was good too. Um, it also said that he took practical steps toward healing. So he sought wise counsel. One of
Mhm.
the things we just talked about.
Mhm.
He had the relationship with the prophet Nathan. So that
Mhm.
was good. He also engaged in activities that brought him peace and comfort. So when we feel like we are being tormented in our minds, when we feel like our mental illness or our mental health is like at a lower level on the spectrum, that's
Right.
one of the things we can also do. We can find things that bring us peace.
Absolutely.
So with David, it was music. It was composing music. It was being in nature, being
Mhm.
outside. He also has supportive friendships. You mentioned that, getting
Yeah.
into communities of
Right.
people that we can trust. So ultimately, like, it's a combination, I feel like, of spiritual practices,
Mhm.
seeking guidance, and fostering positive connections.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's a spiritual aspect of it. So that way, those of you who are watching or who may still have questions can realize, okay, I don't just got to fight this thing practically by myself or practically in like hospital or medicine. I can also fight this thing spiritually.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let's see. I think I had a couple more questions.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So, this was a good one. Can mental health be triggered by seasons? And I know we said we were going to kind of like delineate. So, the first thing is, can mental health be triggered by, I guess, like weather seasons?
Yeah,
And go ahead.
yeah, it can. So there is a no, everything is a condition, right? And a lot of
Mhm.
people have asked, why does everything have to be a diagnosis? Well, unfortunately, in this America, if you want to get treated and you want your insurance to pay for it, it has to be a
Mhm.
diagnosis. That's just how it works, right? And it's called seasonal affective disorder. And a lot of people report in the winter, especially before when it gets dark at like 5 o'clock, that
Yeah.
people report feeling more depressed because of lack of sunlight, because of lack of it's lots of things that go into it. So yes, there is a report of lots of people saying, I can't wait until it's more light outside because I feel so sad. Oh, in the cold, like being in the house in the cold, being in the dark, it does
Mhm.
affect some people's mood. I wouldn't say it's classified as a mental disorder, but it's not something that people typically get medicated for. It's just kind of like a seasonal thing. Like, or if hey, I know when it starts getting cold around, well, depending on where you live, but November, December, January, I struggle with my mood. And it has to do with, they say, the lack of sunlight, and being indoors and not around people in that season. With and people who live in a cold season, it affects people's mood. So that's the only
Wow.
kind of on paper disorder that is connected directly to like our weather and our climate seasons.
That's interesting. So, I said this quote like a while ago that said, "Your mood affects your movement."
Yeah.
So, I'm just trying to think of like a practical way, or like even like as a social worker, licensed and clinical
Mhm.
social worker, what would be something that you could give, or like a step that you can give somebody, like when you kind of struggle, and I'm saying
Yes.
air quotes because, but like when you say, okay, well, I know it's about to be winter, that's when my seasonal my seasonal depression starts. Like,
Yes. Yeah.
how do you combat that? Like, how is that? Like, how
Yeah.
does that
So
work?
I think if for some people, I also believe in the power of like what we say and what we speak. I'm not
Mhm.
saying that people don't have that, because they do. Like for me in the summer, I feel very aggravated. The heat makes me aggravated and that affects my mood, right? So I'm aware of that. So I know I have to have my things with me to cool me down, because I don't want to have an attitude on the beach with my family. But it bothers me. I don't like to be hot. But anyway, when people
Mhm.
are say that, I think sometimes we speak, oh, it's December, here comes my depression. You have
Right.
spoke that. You've
Yeah.
spoken that. So maybe it wouldn't come this year, but you keep speaking that. And we know what the Bible says about our words. But one thing is, I tell people, be active. If you know that the darkness, being inside, that kind of stuff contributes to my low mood, be proactive. I know that. So I'm a set a time to work out. Even though it's dark outside, it's still 6 o'clock. I'm gonna go to the gym, or I'm a
Mhm.
plan, even though it's dark, to have, dinner with a girlfriend, or whatever the things that you enjoy. It varies from person to person. But if you say, oh, it's dark, I'm gonna be in the house, I'm gonna cut the lights off, I'm sad, that's not gonna
Mhm.
help, right? You
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
just kind
Yeah.
of contributing to it. So I say be proactive, make plans that, okay, even though it gets dark on the weekends, I'm still going to be proactive about going to the mall, going out. Or
Yeah.
people say, well, I don't like the cold, I don't want to be out. I mean, so you got to kind of pick which one, right? So either you're
Yeah.
going to say, if I sit in the house alone in the dark, I'm going to be sad, or I have to
Mhm.
push through, put your coat on, do what you need to do, and get out the house. Because usually it's about the sitting in the darkness that
Mhm.
contributes to the low mood, rather than um, yeah, it's usually about our behaviors in that season more than the season themselves, right? Because most
Good.
people are less, it's like during COVID, cases of depression went up because people were isolated, people were alone, they weren't
Yeah. Yeah.
doing things. So it's like,
It's
if you want
not
to
good for men to be alone.
it's
That's the
not good.
Bible.
I mean, get out. If it's once a
Yeah.
week, if it's going for a walk, if it's too
Yeah.
cold for you, go for it. Find an indoor track, do an indoor walk, like whatever. You have to just be a little bit proactive about doing things that fulfill you, regardless of the season.
So D said getting a sun lamp and eating more root veggies help with my seasonal depression.
Yes, the
So
sun
that's
lamp. Yeah,
true.
thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, some people buy, if you work in an office or even in a space, they buy this lamp, and it kind of is supposed to replicate the sunlight that we get. And
Mhm,
they do
mhm.
say the lack of sunlight is what leads to, for some people, the feeling of depression and sadness. So yes, the sun lamp is something I've never tried it personally, but I've heard of
Yeah.
people getting them and saying they feel like it works for them. And our diets play a huge
Oh my God.
excess
Yes.
sugar is not, although it makes you feel good in the moment, it doesn't make you feel good in the long run.
Yeah.
Right. So vegetables would be the opposite of excess sugar. So that would be helpful. Yeah.
That's good. And
Yeah.
it's crazy because what you said about like when you just start to speak like, okay, it's November, I'm about to go into my season of depression. That power of the tongue is so like
Yeah.
crucial. And then I always say like what you tune in, what you tune into, you turn into. So if you're
Mm,
constantly tuning into like, okay, depression activate, or like
right.
like
You called it on to
yeah,
you.
you're calling
Yeah.
it into your atmosphere. So I do
Right.
understand that. I mean,
And that's not to say that it's anybody's fault if they have seasonal depression. So I don't want people to think, oh, it's my fault. But
yeah, yeah.
be mindful of your words. Like, okay, you can say, I know this happens to me every year, but I'm gonna be mindful of speaking about it. I'm gonna use my words to speak against it. And if it still happens, then seek the help that you need. But I would just be mindful of speaking it up or calling it like, oh, here comes my
That is
depression.
so true.
Welcome it in.
Right, like come on, like
Come
settle
on,
in, but
let's
yeah.
go. But just be okay. If you feel it, like, okay, I'm feeling a low mood, then of
Hmm.
course seek the help. Do the things you need to do in that season.
That's good. And then so Sharonda said the importance of fellowship. So yeah, the importance of fellowship, that's important. And she said make plans to be intentional.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's good. That's a good call out. Because one thing you did say was like the lack of sun.
Yeah.
And look at me about to be deep. Look at me
Yeah.
about to be deep. But that's important because like the lack of sun. So it was like that's when we need to be making sure that we are getting in our time with the son of God. Like
Yes.
really
Yes.
calling into like those moves. Like when we feel like, okay, something is happening within me. I don't want to embrace it. I don't want to do what I've been normally doing. Like I don't
Right.
want to always subscribe to um like even like when people, I know we're not really talking about like divorce or other some of these other things, but I feel like it's how you speak about the title that
Mm-hmm.
controls you.
Right.
It's like how you speak about whatever you're going through that kind of gives it some form of control. I've
Mm-hmm.
always like our words, like you said, they are so powerful, and we don't realize how much access we give to our situation with how we label it.
Absolutely.
So of course, okay, somebody who experiences divorce, I don't have to go around saying I'm divorced. I
Right.
experienced divorce, or
Right.
however you want to speak about it. But even someone with that says like, okay, well the seasons are changing, so I know I'm going to go through my seasonal depression. It
Mhm.
can be like, okay, this is what used to happen to me during this time, but this is what I'm choosing to do differently during this time. Like
Right.
choosing something different.
Yes.
I feel like will be a good practice in this season.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so the other part of the question was, let me go back to the question. Can mental health be triggered by, okay, and then also, so we dealt with practical seasons,
Right.
but even with more like a mental or like spiritual seasons.
Seasons of life in general. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I think and this obviously will vary from person to person, but say you had a traumatic experience um
Hmm.
around Christmas time. I'm just going to use that as an example. It's possible that and I know people, and I've experienced this myself, where every year around that time that whatever happened, I start
Yes.
to feel a little down, feel a little sad. It's like, oh, coming up on the anniversary, of that event,
Mm,
because you remember it. So yes, the seasons of life um can affect your mental health. Like, oh, I remember like this is the anniversary of a loved one's death or something that might have
yeah.
happened to you in this season. So because the event that happened to me took place on Christmas Eve, the Christmas season, right? It has nothing to do with the weather or anything like that. But the Christmas season, I can't avoid reminders, right? So the
Mm,
Christmas season brings that up for some people. It's like the summertime. Something happened to me in the summertime. So anytime it gets warm, I start. And again, I know I'm related back to the weather, but I'm just saying in general, the reminders in a particular a season of
right.
life, could trigger anything. And it's so many things that can trigger any particular thing because we're humans and we're sensitive to our environment and things that are happening around us. But absolutely, different life seasons. Or I know somebody who every time they would get a new job, something would happen in their life. So even though when they get a new job, they're like, I'm excited, like what's going to happen next? Because it seems to be like you're in this
Expecting the
cycle. Anytime you
trauma.
get a new job, something
Yeah.
happens over here. So it's kind of like the season of getting a new job or career advancement or employment triggers them, because it's like, last time I got a new job, this happened. Even though it's not related, it's
Yeah.
happening at the same time, right? So that, that season of life could trigger some feelings of anxiety or fear, because you're like, every time this happens over here. So yes, any particular recurring thing in your life, a season, right?
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
trigger any number of, mental health challenges. Anxiety and depression are the most, I mean, there's a bunch of other disorders, but are the most common ones that we see, especially amongst women.
Yeah. And so what would you say, what advice would you give, or like any type of like motivating words to someone who says, you know what, I struggle with anxiety and depression? Because
Mhm.
those are the most popular. Those are the things that we hear about the most. And I think a lot of people are beginning to now self-diagnose themselves
They
with
are.
these things
They
just
are.
because of like one instance, or because of like maybe something they have recently experienced. What would you say from like a clinical standpoint to somebody who's claiming those type of like things, and what to like look out for, I guess, if that, for like a better term?
Yeah, you're right that people are diagnosing themselves, and TikTok
Mm-hmm.
and internet and
Mm-hmm.
reels. There are people telling you, if you do this, you have this. Everybody has this and that. Um, so I have a lot of clients coming to me. They're like, "Oh, I already know I got this," and
Yeah.
I'm like, "Well, actually," and not saying everybody is wrong, but there's
Yeah. Yeah.
medical checklists, right? Like there's things like you wouldn't go to your doctor and say, "I got diabetes." I know it. He would check your insulin levels. He would check your
Yeah.
he wouldn't just, but you got diabetes, cool. Like he would do the checklist thing similarly to your mental health. So it's like, I tell people, well, first, let's look at because everything, the DSM is a book, the Diagnosis Mental Health has, you
Mm-hmm.
have to meet these criteria to be clinically diagnosed with this, right? So with people who are saying I have this or have that, we go through I always say, are you having a moment in time,
Mm.
or has something happened? Like if you lose your job and you feel sad, that's not necessarily depression. You just lost your job, right? So it
Yeah.
makes sense that you would have a response to that. So I would ask people, how long has this been going on? Depression is a chronic thing. How long has this been going on? Well, for the last 6 weeks, I haven't been able to get out of bed. I haven't been able to eat. I haven't been able to shop. Like then we're looking at a period of time. We can say, okay, you've been going this for a while. You might be battling with depression, similarly to anxiety. So my words of your question was, what my words of encouragement for someone who's going through that? Is that
Yeah.
the question?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I always encourage people to seek appropriate help, right?
Right.
I know there's a lot of maybe not anymore, but a lot of taboo still in some environments about therapy. I'm not a prescriber, so I don't tell people to take medication. But if they feel like they need to go that route, it doesn't mean you don't trust God. It doesn't mean that you're a failure, because I hear that a lot. Well, if I take medicine, I'm not letting God heal me.
Mm.
So you've been in the bed for 2 months and haven't been able to shower or do
Yeah.
anything. So
Yeah.
you might need some additional help, and God can still heal you even through that.
Yeah.
But I encourage people, seek proper help, talk to somebody. If you're not ready to talk to a professional, you still feel embarrassed to go that route. That community piece is so important. And I feel like
Yes.
that's why God does not want us to be alone, because we'll just succumb to these
To our
various things.
own. Yes.
Yeah, talk
That's
to
good.
somebody about the thoughts that you're having. If you feel like talking to family and friends is not helpful, seek out professional help. If you feel like you want to go that route, I encourage people to really stay in their word. And I'm not going to lie and say that if you have anxiety, depression, reading your word, magically it goes away, because we know that that's just not
Yeah.
always how it works. But inviting God into that, inviting staying in his presence, like, God, I don't feel great today. I feel like I might be depressed today, but give me your strength to get through whatever it is. We all have different things on our plate, to get through that. Don't go at it alone. So I say, include
Yeah.
God, include other friends and family, include your church community, include professionals if you feel like it's gotten, to that point you really are finding yourself in a rut, unable to get out.
That's good. And like one of the things that I would kind of say to someone who came to me that kind of feels like they may be dealing with these type of like anxiety and depressive thoughts, or even like situations, Obviously, I'm not a licensed and clinical therapist or social worker like
Right.
you, but I believe that the more that we allow the trauma to stay in our bodies, the more it consumes and controls us.
Mhm.
So, one of the ways that I would, encourage people is to get the trauma out. And I'm not just saying that practically like, okay, it's just gonna go away right there. But I'm just saying like when you notice it, when you can diagnose it in your own mind and say, okay, this is what's happening within me. I really believe our mind, like we have the ability to either move mountains or create mountains in our own mind.
Mhm. We
Like
do.
in your mind, you have the ability to either create a mountain or to remove it, all in how you think.
Mhm.
And I really believe that if we allow ourselves to affirm, so I do this thing every morning, or at least literally every morning. On the side of my bed on this wall, I have like 8 sticky notes with just
Mhm.
like two are Bible scriptures, but the rest are just like affirming things over my life. Like today will be a great day. I will overcome every obstacle that gets in my way. I
Mhm.
am whole. I am healed. I am transformed. I'm valuable. I'm loved. These are things that I'm feeding my mind, even
Right.
when sometimes I wake up and I don't feel whole. I'm going
Right.
to affirm that in myself. That's why I really believe the power of affirmations because God says life and death lie in the power of our tongue.
Right.
So if I'm in these death like situations, I know that I need to begin to speak life.
Yes.
And as vice versa, if I'm feeling like I am at a place where my life is going the way God wants it to, and the enemy begins to start, throwing things my way, I speak death to those things.
Right.
So I think we just have to identify where we are, understanding that we can't allow the trauma to control and consume us, and to affirm ourselves. Because the more that we affirm ourselves, the more that we speak life, the more we allow those things to infiltrate our minds. That we have the ability to go ahead and either remove the mountain or we allow it to become bigger and larger.
Right. And I like how you touched on thoughts because anytime I meet with a client who is talking about depression or anxiety, I say, well, what are you thinking about? And what do you mean? Like, what type of things do you think about?
Yep.
Well, and they go down a list of this happened to me. And I'm not saying that the things that happen to you won't impact you, but I
Yeah.
say, well, it sounds like you're rehearsing something that happened and
Mm,
didn't make you feel good when it happened. So of
mm,
course rehearsing is not gonna make you feel good, right? And
yeah.
often it's like, well, they did this to me and they didn't apologize. And I always we gotta keep what do you want to do? You want to stay here? You want to keep going? Because you may
Woo,
not get an apology for the trauma that we may never get apologies for what happened to
Jesus.
us. We may
Jesus.
never people say, "Oh, well, I need closure." So if you don't get closure, are you
Mm,
going to stay in this place? Well, because you
right.
may never get closure. You may
It's
never
a
get an
choice.
explanation of why. You may never get an understanding of why this person left you, why they hurt. You may never get that.
You may
And
never get it.
so if you're going to allow never getting that to keep you in that place, like if you think about the word rehearse, right? Rehearsal, it's doing the same thing over and over.
Over and
Rehear,
over again.
we say rehearse your lines, rehear the lines so you can remember them. That's what that comes from. And
Yeah.
often we're rehearsing our hurts or rehearsing, I don't have this. It's many reasons that people feel what they feel, but we're rehearsing these things, and it leads us to having low mood. What we think about grows, and what we think about directly impacts our mood. There's no
Yes.
disconnection between your
Yes.
thoughts. If I'm thinking about things that hurt me and affect me negative, of course I'm not going to be in a glad
A
mood that
jovial.
day.
Yeah.
Of course
Yeah.
not. That's no. And some days we're just not feeling it. Just there's
Yeah.
a lot of stuff to do. I'm tired. I don't want to do this. And sometimes we're just tired. And it's not necessarily
Yeah.
depression. We just need genuine rest, not sleep. I tell people sleeping doesn't always do it. You need
Yeah.
rest for the soul, and that's
Yes.
resting in God. That's relaxation. Of course we need physical sleep, but
Yeah.
there's so many things that kind of work into play with our mental health because we have a soul, we have a spirit, and then we have this physical world that we wrestle, you know, that we are in, that impacts our mental health as well.
Yeah, that's good. I'll say so. I do have something to say that because I thought that was so good. Oh my God, you said something that triggered a thought.
Was it about the trauma, the getting the closure?
Yes, yes, the closure.
Okay.
So, I tell people that too because I'm like the fact that it closed, that was the closure right there.
Yeah, it
The
closed.
fact that it closed with all the closure that you need, you
Right.
could, like you said, you may never get the answers. You may never know why something happened. You never. This is another thing. We may never know why God took the person because grief is another thing. We
Hmm.
may never get that answer. So my
Right.
thing is, do you want to stay in that place?
Hmm.
or do you want to be made, like just like when God walked up on the scene to the man, do you want to be made whole?
Mm-hmm.
I understand all this has happened. I understand these people ain't putting you in the pool. I understand all this. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
even addressing that. I'm asking you,
Right.
where do you want to be?
Yeah.
And that's so good. And so I have a couple people that are saying a few things. So Amanda asked, so she said, coming to church fellowship and hearing the word has drawn me closer to God, and He has healed me tremendously. However, I still feel the need to vent about things that still bother me. So I'm thinking about trying therapy again. It didn't work for me before. Not only did I not gel with the therapist, but I also didn't feel I needed it at the time. You have to want help in order for it to work, correct, with a question mark. So yeah, you got to want help in order for it to work. That's my first rebuttal to that. But also, I really think there's a difference between venting and declaring.
Mm-hmm.
Venting, like you said, is part of rehearsal,
Right.
because you're constantly living in the trauma, because you're constantly dwelling on it and constantly talking about it and rehearsing how you felt in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I think declaring, hold on, I'm trying to go back to so declaring, and like we said, being honest about what you went through, those are two different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
So
I want to speak really quickly to, you said it was Amanda who said
yes.
about didn't gel with the therapist. I tell everybody therapy is a relationship. And
Yeah.
anytime I meet with a client after a couple sessions, I ask them, how's it going? Do you feel like we're a good fit? And if they say yes, and I'm like, it's okay if you don't feel like I'm a good fit for you, because there's millions of therapists and I may not have my style may not work with what it is you need. And it doesn't, I mean, some therapists might be offended, but I'm not, because I'd rather somebody get what they need from
Yeah.
what they want. You may want something different, and that's okay. So it's okay to, I tell people, don't give up on therapy because you didn't have a great first therapeutic experience. Just like you don't,
Mm.
so you may date somebody and then you don't stop dating because you had one bad dating experience. Like, you might have to keep trying and really figuring
And
out
you
what it
find
is you
your
want.
match.
Find your match and give it. I've had people do 2 sessions. Well, I don't feel better, so I'm quitting. Give it a chance. You've had
Yeah.
years of experience and you want a stranger to magically help you solve your problems in 2 or 3 sessions. It's just not going to happen. So give it a chance, and I hope you find somebody that you feel like you can really connect with.
Exactly. That's good. And then let me see, somebody else said, forgiveness for yourself, healing from past hurts, and grace to others. We are at different levels of life. That's true. I think the first thing, though, I believe that we as women, um, we should have grace for ourselves.
Yeah,
Start with grace for yourself first, because I feel like you can't extend something that you don't possess.
you
Like,
cannot.
how am I extending grace and I don't even have, I'm beating myself up for the things that I feel. and
Mm-hmm.
and like, I think we touched on this earlier when you were talking about our feelings. It's so important for us to feel our feelings. I always say this, but don't be fueled by them,
Mm-hmm.
because our emotions, our feelings, they change in an instant. But
Mm-hmm.
if we allow ourselves to, like, okay, that hurt me, so okay, this is how I felt when that hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can understand the triggers about, okay, the next time this happens, okay, this is not a feeling that I like. But
Right.
if I immediately allow those feelings to begin to overtake me and I start acting out based off those feelings, it's like every time something like that, even close or remotely happens, I'm flying off the handle.
Yes.
So
Yes. Yes.
all right, so let's see here. Yes, that's stinking thinking. I don't know what I've heard that term, Amanda. I don't know you must have been replying to something we said, but she was like stinking thinking. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think for me, doing midday motivation, y'all know how we do doing midday motivation. I am prayerful that something that we said today struck a nerve. This was the
Yeah.
conversation I hope that struck like a nerve for you, to be like, you know what? I have the power to either cancel out this mountain or create
Mm-hmm.
bigger mountains in my mind based
Mm-hmm.
on how I deal with the issues and the trauma that I've been dealing with.
Absolutely.
Um, and okay, I'm gonna take this last question before we. She said, I used to have panic attacks as well, and I learned how to deal with them by avoid. I learned to deal with them, avoid them by changing my thoughts that I would be having when I felt one coming on. Definitely had to change my negative thoughts. That's so good. We don't understand the power that we possess in our mind.
Yes.
Like it's so crazy, because I even noticed that with myself. I wouldn't say I was depressed, But a few years ago, I knew I felt myself in like a dark place.
Mhm.
And I was like, one day I literally was just sitting there like, why do I feel like this?
Mhm.
Like, what is it? And I
Right.
was like, you know what? Every time I felt like this, I was going to start to think the opposite of what I was feeling.
Right.
And I really started, and from there, I feel like I walked out this healing journey because I was like, you know what? I don't have to hold on to the brokenness.
You don't.
God has given me an opportunity to be whole.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, it's there. Like you
And I want
said,
to say this one last thing, 'cause it just came to
go
me.
ahead.
I think a lot of women, because if you've had a lot of trauma, a lot of things, they struggle to believe they can have an identity outside of that, and the trauma
Mm,
becomes their identity. Like, well,
mm.
who am I if I can't talk about? And I'm not saying you know, like people struggle to believe the way I can have a healed identity. I don't have to be the broken
Come
person. I
on.
don't have that doesn't have to be my identity, because some people struggle to like, well, who will I be if I'm not talking about this? But I'm not
A
saying that
holistic woman.
yeah, a holistic woman. Doesn't mean you can't share your testimony that
Come
includes those
on.
things,
Come
but you
on.
don't have to be that. And that path to finding a new identity in Christ, a holistic woman identity, is a lot of work. It's easier to just,
Yeah.
well, I can stay in this. I can just be this. It's
Yeah.
a lot of work to get to that. So I'm mindful of that with people, but I'm like, you can have an identity that includes a testimony, not a
Yes.
sum total of who you are, that thing,
Yeah.
whatever that thing might have been, might be.
Yeah. That's so good. Like you have the opportunity to create who you want to be. Even and then like you
Yes.
said, who am I outside of my trauma? A teacher, a coach.
Yeah.
Because once you get on the other side of something, you can bring somebody else out from the same pitfall or the same, cave or the same thing that you've been through. We need you to tell your testimony. But the only
Yes.
way you get a testimony is after you go through the test.
Yep. It's the
So
only
you
way.
don't have to stay where you are. So that's so good. Like you don't
Yeah.
have to allow the trauma to be your identity.
Right.
Allow the healing to be your identity and that just be a part of the story. I
Yes.
love that.
Yes.
I love that. Well, I am so like this conversation was so helpful, and we're definitely going to do it again. Thank you to
Okay.
everybody that tuned in. Hopefully, you
Yes.
have
Thank
been
you.
motivated to take your mental health and really to exercise and to strengthen your mind and the way you think, look, and feel about mental health, about going to therapy, about allowing God to really get all in your business, getting into your word and understand the correlation between mental illness and how your spiritual fitness and how your spirituality really plays a part in allowing you to heal and overcome from life experiences, because that's what we do as holistic women. We want to be women who are healing and overcoming life experiences, and all of us have some experiences in our life that I really believe, let if we know it or not or believe it or not, they came to break us. Some things could have broken us, but we have whole health in Christ. So
Yes.
thank you so much, Unique. Y'all send some
Of
hearts,
course.
some claps,
Thank you
everything
for
in the
having
chat,
me.
and tell her thank you for being a part, not just a part of this community, but helping us to see mental illness in a different light. So thank you
Yes.
so much.
Of course. Anytime.
um I'm gonna let you go because I just got a couple announcements that I want to share with them. Have a
Okay.
good day. Talk to you later.
Thank you so much. Take
You're
care.
welcome. All right, ladies. So we just have a few announcements. Don't forget, we do have our meetup coming up. This is going to be next Tuesday. Make sure you are in the building. I got a surprise for y'all next Tuesday. So make sure you are there. We're going to have a good time. And then we also want to make sure that y'all know that we be praying. We be praying on the prayer line every Monday morning at 6:30 a.m. So this is the time for us to come together and pray with one another. It is a good time for us to kind of let some burdens down. And even though we're on the prayer line, you can still be in community. You can still pray with us. We love that the women have still been like occupying the prayer line. Y'all still be on there deep, and I appreciate that. And then also just a reminder that Holistic Women's Weekend tickets are on sale now, y'all. And I'm so grateful because tickets are selling September 19th to the 21st. Do not forget to get your tickets. We have flexible pay options, all that. So if you need to get your ticket, invite the girls, invite your family. I would love to see y'all in the place. It is going to be Oh my God, transformative is going to be an awakening. It's going to be an amazing time for us to get together and have the most amazing time. And then I think that's all the announcements we have so far. Join me next week for another Holistic Women Wednesday as we do midday motivation. This was really good. I really hope that it did bless somebody, and I really pray that y'all have the most amazing day. Thank y'all for spending your lunchtime with us, and I will talk to y'all soon. Stay tuned to our social media pages too, because we got some info dropping today and tomorrow, I think. Okay. Love y'all so much. Have an amazing day. And don't forget, listen, share the Holistic Women community with somebody, okay? Go ahead and conquer your health today. Love y'all.